The information found in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hi, and welcome to the Women in Depth podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lourdes Viado. Join me as we explore the inner lives of women, their struggles, fears, hopes, and dreams. We'll go beneath the surface and take a deeper look at what is hidden, unknown, uncertain, and uncomfortable. Hi, and welcome back to the podcast. I am very excited about my guest today. Her name is Dr. Ashlee Greer, and she works with highly sensitive, empathic women to live a hell yes life where they leave the shoulds behind. Her clients learn to live a passion-filled, turned on, lit up life where everything is possible and to connect with their own intuitive genius. Ashlee helps women begin to stop prioritizing other people's opinions, to give themselves permission to go after their own desires, to be deeply self-expressed. I love that phrase, by the way. Self-confident, vibrant, and to release the limiting beliefs that have made them feel selfish or self-centered for putting themselves first in the past. Ashlee's mission is to help you never settle again. She has a Ph.D. in psychology, is powerfully psychic, and has over a decade of experience helping hundreds of people create passionate, vibrant, fulfilled, and joyful lives. Hi, Ashlee, and welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited about our conversation. And, as we were talking before we started the official interview, I just couldn't believe all the different snafus that were happening, because this is one of those things that I was just wanted it to, go well and not have any hiccups. But then I just thought, I think that speaks to the whole beauty of this, which is there's no perfect plan and you just kind of go with it. And that's what we're doing.
Right. The beauty and the perfection is in the ability to flow with it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so today, just to let our audience know what we are going to be talking about, what the main focus is the decision, the process, the experience of choosing to go no contact with parents, but this can also be family members, anyone you're in a relationship with that is toxic and doesn't help you to be your authentic self. I was looking at your website, preparing for our interview, and I was just really inspired, moved, wowed by your own story of, just kind of picking up and leaving everything and moving to Hawaii and completely changing your direction. Could you just share a little bit about that with our listeners?
Oh, sure. I'll share my quick story. So how long ago was this now? About 4 years ago now, I was a successful psychologist. I worked in a college counseling center, specialized in sexual assault. I was really good at what I did. I was engaged to a nice man. We owned a house together. I had a life that looked really good on paper. Everybody would say, look at that life and say, wow, you succeeded. You did it. And I was miserable. I call it, I was living in the shades of khaki. I was just living this life that was just like very normal. And like I said, looked good on paper. I'm kind of a glorified, I love being a weirdo. You know what I mean? Being a little bit outside of the norms, color outside of the box. And I just kind of swallowed the status quo pill for a long time. Grad school does that to you quite a bit. And learned how to be a good girl, which actually, goes with what we're talking about today, about some of these, unhealthy parenting patterns and stuff like that can force you into needing to be a good girl to get approval. I just woke up one day and I was having all this chronic illness and all this stuff, and I was just miserable. And so I ended up quitting my job, actually for a better job. I know this might not sound better, but I got a job at a psychiatric prison.
Okay.
Right? No.
Again,
it paid better.
It's not what it sounds like, right? It's not what it appears.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It paid better, fewer hours, things like that. But then I was like, oh, hell no. Like in a week, I was like, nope, this is not better. I have stomach aches every morning. No. And so I quit that and I started to do some writing, ended up starting to do some writing for coaches. And I was like, what is this whole coaching thing? let me, go into this a little bit and see what this is all about. In the meantime, I started to ask for everything I wanted and needed in my relationship. And I decided it would either make us or break us. It broke us, which was a good thing because he just wanted to stay in the town we lived in forever. And so I ended up leaving him, leaving the job, all within like a year, moving to another town. I moved to Austin, Texas for a while. And then from there, I went minimalist and I got rid of all of everything. I have a suitcase and a half of belongings now.
Wow.
And yeah, I traveled around the country, around the US. And then eventually I was like, what do I really want? And I wanted to move to an island. I wanted to check that out. And Hawaii seemed like, a safe bet. It was gorgeous. It was jungly. And I moved out there. And then, as you know, I then took a deeper jump and now I live in Bali.
Wow.
And so I live in a completely different country now and have just totally taken the lid off of what was possible for me in my life.
That's amazing.
5 years ago, this was not possible. I did not think you could live like this.
I was, when you were describing your life, the shades of khaki, I was reminded of, I don't know if it was an interview or I read this or heard this somewhere, but a person was describing their life also. And then, on the surface, it looked like a wonderful life. And the person said that it's a wonderful life for someone else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think too, just that, the whole good girl thing is something that so many of us get entrapped in. We don't even realize it. We don't even know that that's what's happening.
Exactly.
And then, you're with this, you say you're describing like just how you were feeling off. And Carl Jung once said that every symptom that we have, whether it's a psychological symptom or a physical symptom, that it goes back to the person being disconnected with their instinctual nature, with who they are. And so when you break that connection, your body, your psyche lets you know in some way.
Totally. I almost literally felt like every part of me was screaming, but my brain was telling me, like trying to be logical and be like, no, be logical. This life is a good life. And my body was screaming, my spirit was screaming, my emotions were screaming, no, get out. Like a horror movie,
Yeah.
and you're like, get out.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I wanted to start, one of the reason that I wanted to have this conversation with you is I think it was sometime last year, I ran across something you wrote, and it was about, the choice to go no contact with people in your life. And I see this struggle with clients, and it can be their immediate family, it can be friendships, it can be anyone, but there's a real struggle to walk away from unhealthy or to remain in something that's just toxic. And so I wanted to have this conversation with you because I feel that you kind of embody this whole theme of it's severing yourself from what is holding you back and what's preventing you from what I love how you said that, from being deeply self-expressed. Oh my gosh, that's just beautiful. And I think that, people get caught up in, I'll feel guilty, I'll feel bad. This is my mother. I can just do this. So, if you can just kind of jump in there, Ashlee, wherever you feel like,
Absolutely.
Commenting.
So I remember what the quote was. It was, a parent's relationship with an adult child is a privilege and not a right.
Yeah. Powerful.
And it was actually something that someone else said to me a long time ago that I've just really started to live by because, I have narcissistic and alcoholic parents, and I was struggling with them at one point, and someone said that to me, and I was like, oh, you mean they don't have a right to my life? What? And it was one of those moments when I woke up to everything that was possible for me. And interestingly, a year before I started making all these choices to leap, I went no contact. And so I truly believe that without that, I never would have been able to make these choices. The reason being is that I had somebody in my life who was constantly critiquing my choices. Like you and I were talking about, I have a tattoo on my arm of the Om symbol. And this parent said to me when they saw that, like, only drug addicts have tattoos. You will never marry a banker now. And I looked at them and I was like, do you know me at all? Like, I was never going to marry a banker. Like, what? what? And it was like one of those moments when it was like, wait a minute, no, you don't see me. I don't get to exist in this relationship. What I have to be is a mirror of what you want me to be. And as long as I'm in a relationship with somebody who has the expectation that I have to hold presence of who they want me to be, I'm never allowed to be myself. And as long as I'm not allowed to be myself, I'm never free to live my life how I need to live it in order to be, fully satisfied, fully free, fully expressed, fully just orgasmically blissful in my life, because I'm always focused on someone else's happiness and pleasure.
Yeah, it reminds me of something you had on a article you wrote for Huffington Post, and I'm probably not going to say it very well. I know I had it in front of me, but I don't now. Anyway, you basically said something that when you put your true self last and you prioritize other people, you're basically saying "fuck you" to your true self, which I thought was pretty powerful.
Exactly. You're saying like I am the least important person in this relationship.
Yeah.
Like I said, like you were saying, I work with, highly empathic and sensitive women, particularly because these women tend to be the ones particularly who are in these relationships who are focused on keeping everybody else happy. And I think generally women get kind of indoctrinated to do this. I mean, if you think about the role of women in society and the role of patriarchy, and we could get really deep into that if you want to, but depending on how far you want to go down this rabbit hole. But we have been conditioned to keep other people happy in our life. Our role is to keep our boss happy, or to keep our parents happy, to keep our spouse happy, to keep our kids happy. But where do we come in that whole equation? I believe that we have it all backwards. I think there's some people who are kind of narcissistic and maybe they don't have it backwards and they have it twisted all up. But the people who I work with have it backwards. And I actually have this thing that I call the reverse golden rule, that I say, do unto yourself as you would do unto others. Because people forget about themselves. They put themselves last and they think, well, whatever scraps are left, then I can have that.
Yeah. It's like they never even consider themselves,
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then you get into it's a cliche, but you can't serve from an empty cup. You have to serve yourself first in order to serve someone else, or like the example of being on an airplane. You have to put your own oxygen mask on first before you put on the oxygen mask of your child. And that's not because you're a cold-hearted bitch, because you don't care about your child.
Right.
It's because unless you take care of yourself, you don't have anything to give. And unless you take care of yourself, you don't have a life worth living.
This, I know that all therapists agree with me, but that's okay. One of the things that I've always felt, and this goes in line with your saying about putting yourself first, like a enlightened selfishness or a conscious selfishness, is I feel that, people will come to therapy and they want to do couples work. And I firmly believe that the most important couples work you do is your individual work with yourself. It's just, you get into right relationship with yourself, you work on yourself, you learn to love yourself, you romance yourself, and then that will all work itself out. I feel like sometimes we do the couples therapy, but the two haven't done their own work. And so it's kind of just not real. To me, it's not as effective.
Yes, 100%. And I think that a lot of, because I did, a specialty rotation in couples myself when I was in training, and loved couples therapy, but I would always find that half the trouble with couples is that they're looking for the other person to make them happy.
Right.
And it's like, if we're constantly seeking out, external anchoring of our happiness, of our joy, of our being good enough, of our feeling good in our own life, in our own body, whatever it is, then we're always putting that power in somebody else's hands, which means that we're always fundamentally powerless in our life.
With this whole concept of going no contact, Ashlee, what would some of the questions that I get are, how do I know that this is something that is right for me? Going no contact. And then it's, how do I actually begin this process? And I don't know if maybe there are some things here that I'm skipping, but if there's a listener right now who's in a situation with a narcissistic or otherwise some kind of relationship that's toxic, where does she start?
I think one of the most important concepts when it comes to anything, even whether it's going no contact in a relationship with somebody who's, abusive in some way, emotionally, physically, verbally, any of that stuff, or even if it's about like getting a new job or anything, is you want to ask yourself, are you moving towards something or are you running away from something? I think that's a really important concept to think about, because we don't want to just always run away from things, because when we are, we're actually kind of taking that energy with us of whatever we're running away from. Like if we're leaving a job because we're running away from it and it's terrible, that's what, you know what I mean? Instead of running towards something we really want. So what I mean by this is, so we're talking about going no contact with like a parent, for example. If we're running away from it, we're saying to ourselves, I haven't done the work on myself. I haven't done the work to be able to talk to the other person and say, this is not an okay boundary. You've crossed this boundary. Set boundaries, tried to set boundaries at least,
Right.
talk to them about things, tried to actually be proactive about what's going on in the relationship. You don't just want to like say, oh, I'm uncomfortable and I'm going to leave, because that isn't actually confronting what's uncomfortable in our life, because things are always going to be uncomfortable. And a lot of people are really uncomfortable with conflict. And it's not a matter of just running from any kind of conflict. But once you get to that point where you have tried to set boundaries and you have tried to, shape their behavior through things like, not engaging with them when they are acting inappropriately and things like that. Honestly, you do a lot of, this is going to sound a little bit ridiculous, but at that stage, before you're ready to go no contact, you do a lot of training like you would a dog. Like, you know what I mean? Like you only reward good behavior. And if it's bad behavior, you just completely ignore it, or you completely withdraw your attention. And that's what I suggest usually before you choose to go no contact. If that doesn't work at all, then you have to ask yourself, am I sacrificing my happiness to have this person in my life? Am I sacrificing my well-being? Am I sacrificing my ability to be who I am, my ability to be self-expressed? Like I was saying earlier, like I never would have made the choice to move to Bali had I still had that relationship in my life, because that person would have constantly been like, are you crazy? Leaving your PhD? You're going to quit being a psychologist? Are you stupid? Like that I would have had that constant criticism that would have constantly had me questioning myself and playing smaller, because that I would have been keeping the other person happy. For me, what happened is it was a really fast decision, and I didn't make a decision for the rest of my life. I made a decision for now. I'm not going to speak to this person for now. And then that for now just kept expanding. And I just realized I got more and more relaxed as that for now just kept going. And I never wanted to go back again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I think too that even being able to just say, this is my decision for now, is really freeing, because you're not thinking beyond just this moment. And it's very doable when you look at it that way. It's not as big, going back to what you were saying earlier about, you don't just walk away and asking that question. Why is it so important that someone do that work before actually going no contact? Making that effort. Why do you emphasize that?
The reason I emphasize that is because otherwise you're going to run into relationship after relationship after relationship, which are just the same, because you haven't worked on your own issues within that relationship. And I'm not saying you have to stay in that relationship and work all the way through it, but like say you have a narcissistic parent who always tells you what to do, and you just run away from it instead of finally at a certain point being like, you know what, you can't really tell me what to do anymore, and then they don't like it, and then you decide to leave. What's going to happen is you're going to walk into another narcissistic relationship, a narcissistic boss, a narcissistic partner, a narcissistic friend, and that person's going to tell you what to do. And you're still not going to have the skills to be able to stand up and say, you know what, this isn't okay. I get to say what I'm a sovereign being. You're going to run away from it again. And you're constantly going to be running away into the arms of somebody else who is, basically reiterating that same pattern in your life, because you haven't worked through the pattern within yourself yet.
Because really doing that work of saying, this is not okay, and this is my boundary, and this is what I need, and this is what I want, that is deeply expressing yourself and asking for what you need and what you want.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And it's really important work. And it's the setting that boundary isn't so much about what they do.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people think, well, I set the boundary so that they obey it, or so that they pay attention to it. Yes, but they might not. It's not so much about that. It's about standing up for yourself, and it's about standing up for your desires and standing up for your needs. Because once you do that, then you always know where your boundary is and where your limits are. And you say, oh, well, you're crossing this boundary, warning. You get a warning for crossing over this boundary. Oh, you're not going to respect my warning? Okay, now I'm out.
Yeah.
And now I know where my limit is. And now I know that you're not going to respect it. And it's really just that internal work, exactly like you were saying, of truly expressing yourself, of truly expressing that it's not, it's even deeper than just expressing yourself. It's like truly expressing that you get to have what you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because how many people who are raised in houses with, narcissists or abusive or, controlling parents or whatever they might be, believe that their existence is somehow meant to be there for other people. Well, I'm there so that other people can get what they want. Well, I hate to put it in these terms, but I think it's really important, especially as we get into this, midlife area, is when you are on your deathbed, none of those other people who you've been living for your whole life are going to be laying there with you, going through that process with you. And you're only going to be able to review your life and say, did I make the choices that really were important? Did I do the things that I really wanted to do? Or did I constantly demur from them to
Yeah.
make other people happy?
This is, this reminds me of one of my mentors, James Hollis, and he phrased it, are you living in shoes that are too small for you? Does this, and he
Mm,
always asks the question, does this diminish me or make me larger? Does this
yes,
constrict me or give me expansion and freedom?
I love
And I
that.
think a lot of times in these unhealthy relationships, we have to get smaller. We can't be too big or too bright or too anything.
Exactly. And so then we're not allowed to have big dreams, or we're not allowed to have that vibrancy, because heaven forbid you should outshine anybody.
Yeah. And I love to, I just how you made that nuance about, the decision to leave. There's a process to it that's significant and meaningful, because if you just leave, like you said, you'll repeat the pattern. Um,
Mhm.
and the other thing too that Dr. Hollis once said was that wherever you're stuck, wherever you haven't done the work, that's going to continue. You'll continue that somewhere. And so sometimes you'll see adult children who will say, oh, I'm never going to be like my parent. I left home. I haven't gone back. But they are still just as much under that toxic influence as if they were physically still close to that family member or that significant other, because they haven't done the work. So even though there's a geography, the problems are still showing up.
Yes, 100%. And this is perhaps a bit, I hope this is okay. This is perhaps a bit of a radical concept, but we think about these relationships and these patterns showing back up in terms of, like, a partnership or a friendship or a parent. But people also need to be wary of these patterns showing back up and following big name gurus.
Yeah.
Like, this new person has all the answers and now I can just fall under their spell and follow them. And it's like, we need to anchor inside of ourselves.
Yeah.
You need to say, I have the answers. And if these people, whoever you're following, whether it's a personal development guru or whatever, if they're telling you they have the answers, that's just another narcissistic relationship you've gotten into.
Right. And that happens. That
It really
I
does.
see it all the time. I saw a quote recently, it's probably this week, and someone said that people, because they don't want to do the work, they just want someone to tell them what to do in a way.
Hmm.
So they said,
Hmm.
so people will pay someone to tell them how to have an authentic life, how to be spiritually connected, how to, and really you have to, again, do that work for yourself. Otherwise,
Right.
you'll just go from one authority figure to another who, yeah,
Exactly. And never realizing your own self authority.
yeah. So you had touched on this earlier, Ashlee. You were talking about, when you're on your deathbed and doing this inventory. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because one of the articles on your website that really grabbed my attention was the one you wrote on how to know what you really want.
Hmm.
And that's really what you're speaking to. So can you go into that a little bit more? Because I just think that's so powerful.
Yeah, I think that a lot of folks don't have a clue what they want, particularly these folks who have had some unhealthy relationships. They know how to keep everybody else around them happy. I mean, this is the thing, is even if, like, anybody, you don't even have to have a dysfunctional background for this, but think about the way school is structured. You go to school when you're like, oh, this cute little 7-year-old, and you are not taught to think, oh, gee, what do I want to learn today? Oh, gee, what am I curious about? Oh, gee, what excites me? You were taught to pay attention to what somebody else is telling you to pay attention to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're taught to follow the rules of what it is to be successful. And this is the other thing, like, and this is outside the box what you just asked, but our culture is shifting away from people just doing the work, being good little worker bees, the way it's been for, millennia because of the industrial age. We are shifting into the creative age where we need to reclaim our creative abilities to say, oh, let's put together these different things. Let's think about these things in a different way. And this is the thing that we've lost because of the way our culture has kind of indoctrinated us and the way that many of us were brought up, with some of these dysfunctional backgrounds and stuff, is we've decided, we've not decided, but we have kind of decided. Sorry, I'm like thinking through that. To toe the line of what it is other people want us to do, other people desire for us, what even marketing tells us is a successful life. And we're not sitting there and, like you said, doing the work and saying, well, what does it actually mean and look like to me to live a successful life?
Yeah.
Like, for me personally, living a successful life doesn't necessarily have anything to do with owning a home or being married or any of the things that other people think, is a successful life. But each of my clients is totally different. Some of them it is being married and having, being a wife and a mother. Some of them it's having a successful business. It's all unique. Some of them it's traveling the world. Some of them it's being a rock, in a rock band. It doesn't matter what it is, but we don't take the time to say, what is it that would make my life, if I got to the end and I looked back and said, now that was a hell of a ride. That was worth the price of entry. That was worth all the tears. That was worth all of the, the times that I had to stay up all night working. That was worth all the baby vomit or whatever, whatever the hard stuff is. That was so worth it because I blank. And what do you fill in that blank with? What is it that a successful life will entail for you? And most people, when I ask them questions like that, say, gosh, I don't know. I don't know. I don't even know. Because they've been spending so much time focused on keeping other people happy. And this is why, going back to our original topic, that going no contact with somebody who is destructive and controlling in your life and toxic can actually free you to figure out what you actually want, because you're no longer wasting all of that time and energy focused on keeping them happy and fulfilling their wants and desires.
Because really, when you're doing that, you've kind of sacrificed your life for them.
Exactly. And then you get to the end of your life and you're like, oh, well, I'm glad they were happy. Shoot, do over. And it's too late,
Yeah. And I see that too, asking people, what matters most to you? And okay, if we can't figure that out, what do you like? What do you dislike? And it's just, and I think sometimes, whatever comes up for the individual as they grapple with these questions, I think they get a little scared, and then they kind of, I don't know the answers, and what does it mean that I don't know the answers? And if I do know the answers, what does that mean for my current situation? Because maybe my answers won't fit the life I'm living. And then what? Right?
Yep. No, I was gonna say, and so then sometimes they choose to go back to sleep because they're too afraid of what that might mean for their life.
So this is truly like a waking up process, right? Moving from sleepwalking to dancing to just kind of being in this. It's almost like it reminds me of, do you remember the movie Matrix with Keanu Reeves?
Oh, I love that movie.
And how the people, they were all like just plugged into something. They weren't really living.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But they were alive, but it wasn't an existence where they were doing what they wanted to. They were all under, the control of something else.
Yes.
Yeah. And that was what was sustaining them.
Absolutely. And it was sort of like this unrealized indoctrination of how you're supposed to live your life. And I think that's the truth of the way that most of our society is living. I don't say that to point blame at everybody and say, like, see, you little zombie, or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of creating guilt. What it is, it's a matter of creating a doorway.
Yeah.
Like, all of a sudden you rub your eyes and you're like,
wow,
there's been a door in front of me the whole time.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's behind it?
Yeah.
Let's go open it.
And you're right. Some people see the door and they open it and then they dash through, and others see the door and they just decide that that door's not there and they don't want to go through that, you know?
Yeah. And I definitely don't want people to think like when I told my story, my own personal story earlier, you have to realize that like I was engaged to that guy for 7 years, or we were together for 7 years. You know what I mean? I was a psychologist for years and knew I was unhappy. I knew it wasn't the right path, probably much earlier than that. You know, it
Yeah.
took years for me to come to a point where I was so dissatisfied that I was able to wake myself up. And this is another really important point that's a little bit off topic, but it's also really important is it's so important to feel all of your emotions and to feel all of that sense of dissatisfaction, because without it, you're going to continue to be asleep, because that is the clue that something isn't right.
Right. Your emotions are your GPS system for your soul.
Exactly.
And if you listen to their messages, they won't lead you astray. But I think that's also why, people numb out, ignore their emotions, because, our emotions, each one has a message or two, and it's there to tell you something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that I feel like I'm critiquing society on your podcast today. There's so much in our society right now that is formulated to continue to make us feel okay being asleep.
Yeah. A lot.
I can't tell you how many things I numb myself with through those years to try to be okay with a situation that really wasn't fulfilling my soul.
Yeah. And I think too, a lot of these things that we numb ourselves with, I guess you could think of the standard numbing agents like alcohol, drugs, those types of things. But you can numb yourself with being involved with your community, with work, with being a parent, which, I know that for some that can also be, what do you mean? But for some, they lose themselves in parenthood, or they use parenthood as the reason why they weren't able to do the things that they wanted to do, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And again,
absolutely.
I want, just like you were saying, everyone's wake up call is a different process and will look very different for everyone. I'll just share a little bit about, for me, several years ago, I think this is probably, oh my gosh, good 15, 20 years ago. I was engaged to be married to a man I'd been with for, I think, 6 years, great family. We had dated long enough. So now I'd finished my bachelor's. It was time to get married. And I just had this feeling that this wasn't the right thing for me, but everyone told me that was normal jitters. Everyone's nervous before they get married. And I believe them, because I started saying this like 6 months before the wedding date. And then 9 days before, just something, I woke up and I knew that this was not the right decision. And the most loving thing I could actually do for this man was to not marry him.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up calling off the wedding, and it was 9 days before, and it was pretty disruptive to a lot of people. And I got a lot of flack for that. And then another thing was, several years ago, I had been with the school district for several years, successful, had moved up in the counseling department as much as you could. It just I didn't feel alive. I didn't have that zest. I just felt like I was just kind of going through the motions, and it was very hard, but leaving that, and then, hearing from people, but this is a secure job. You have a salary, you have benefits, all of those things. So I just to give people an example that this can look very different.
Absolutely. And I want to give you a ton of kudos for doing all of that.
Oh, thanks, Ashlee.
Absolutely. But I also love that, you said like people kept saying, this is a secure job.
Yeah.
And I think that brings up another really important point with all of this is, how many decisions do we actually make from fear?
Right.
Like I have to be safe. So I have to make a decision to stay in this job that I hate, because at least I'm safe. I have to make a decision to stay in this marriage that, you know what I mean, isn't fulfilling me, because at least I'm safe. And I don't know what might be out there through that door.
Right.
I don't know what might exist out there. There could be lions. Well, there could be a birthday party.
Right.
You don't really know.
Exactly. You don't know. It could be it.
Right. Exactly. But I think that people really underestimate the fact, because especially if they come from these kinds of backgrounds with these parents and relationships that have felt really controlling, they think that whatever exists past the door is going to still be controlled by other people.
Right.
But what exists past the door of no contact, or deciding to jump, or deciding to end their, engagement and not get married, or whatever it is, that it's still going to be defined by other people. But that is the moment when we can take the power back and say, no, you see, whatever's through that door is whatever the hell I want it to be.
Right. Oh, I love that. I love that. And I think that, that rush of, because when I called off this wedding, as soon as it was done and I walked out that door, I just felt like this, I felt alive. I felt radiant, like just all this energy. It was just, I could feel like I had gone from being stuck to in motion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I think too, when, this is such a, this experience of going no contact, because it really is bigger than no contact. It's setting yourself free from whatever is preventing you from being fully alive.
100%.
Yeah. And no contact is just one of those forms,
Exactly. And I think it can, in a lot of ways, it can be one of those first steps for people, because it sort of clears the air. It sort of like clears the background noise of all, because usually the person you're going to go no contact with is the person who's been sitting there on your shoulder telling you, like giving you all the flack, like you said,
right,
for whatever choices that would feel really, really exciting and scary, but exciting too, and you're like, I'm gonna go move to Hawaii, like, or I'm gonna go move to Bali, or I'm gonna go leave my job, my secure job. And those are the people who would be like, are you crazy? No, nobody does that.
Yeah.
And once you go no contact with those people, suddenly you've got silence. And you only, and this is still another big battle, you only have to deal with the internalized critic inside of you. But at least that's something you have control over, because you don't have any control over that person criticizing you. You can set the boundary, and then you can go no contact. And then you only have those, whatever's going on inside of you to deal with, which you can move through. You can silence those voices. And once you do that, then you get that silence, that blank canvas on which you can create whatever the hell you want.
So one of the things that happens when, when you're in these, I guess in these environments or families or relationships where you are not able to be who you are, along with not knowing yourself and not being able to use your emotions as a guide because you're disconnected from them. I think something else that can happen is you don't notice indications, or you don't use your intuition, and you're not paying attention to synchronicities, or what in the ancient days they would call them omens. And I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit, because one of the things I've noticed for myself and the clients I work with is the more work they do on themselves, the more connected they become with their inner lives. They are able to use their intuition to make those decisions, able to trust their feelings, and to go with, they had a feeling, they saw something, that they're able to put these, like, do a dot to dot and trust themselves, and they move forward with that. And I think that is so, when I see clients connecting with that, I'm so excited for them, because I feel they've reached just another major, I guess, like threshold in this process.
Totally. Like, and so this like goes back to what I was saying before about we've got to feel it.
Yeah.
Like we've got to feel the discomfort that wakes us up to leaving situations that are not in our best interest. But we've also got to feel the, really, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Those intuitive nudges that say, over here,
Right.
what's that?
Right.
And when we are asleep, when we are numb, when we are sort of, hooked up with the IV to the zombie juice, we
love that.
We are not awake to those intuitive nudges, because though, whether it's the person's voice who we haven't yet disconnected with, who's saying, no, that's crazy, or it's our own internalized judge who's saying, no, that's crazy, or it's, we're numb from it or whatever. We don't listen to that intuitive sense that something is wrong. So I've got a really good example of this, and it sounds crazy. Like when I was in Hawaii, I was in paradise, right? I
Right.
mean, everybody's like, I want to move to Hawaii. And I remember one day, and it was just this clear as day. I was doing some powerful meditations with Pele, the goddess of the volcano there, and all this stuff. And I got a clear as day nudge that I needed to move from Hawaii, that I had to move on. And I remember saying to myself, "Are you crazy? You moved, you moved to paradise, and you're going to look paradise in the mouth and go, nope, I'm going to keep going. See ya." And I did that to myself. I had all those like little internal judges that nitpicked at me and said, like, no, that's not logical.
Right. Right.
That's not, that doesn't make any sense. And I was like, but it feels so right.
Yeah.
I'm going to Bali. I don't know why I'm going to Bali.
But that's what felt right.
And that's what felt right. Because and this goes to, reclaiming that power, reclaiming that sense that we get to be self-sovereign, reclaiming that sense that we get to be self-expressed. When we take all of that inside of ourselves, we get to allow ourselves to be excited about what it is we're excited about. We get to connect with what it is that brings us joy. And that's where those breadcrumb trails of our intuition are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In all of those little joys that we haven't really allowed ourselves to tune into for so long. In all of those little the sense of, this excites me, but nobody else likes it. So am I allowed to like it?
Yeah.
Whether it's thrasher metal or, orchids, it doesn't really matter. But, if it doesn't fit with the people you're around, you might decide that that's stupid to like. And so I got to silence it. But who knows? You could be the most famous orchid farmer in the world in 10 years if you follow that nudge and follow this. I don't know why, but I have to go study orchids.
Yeah. You know what I love about this too is, like you said, I don't know why. This just feels right. It's not logical. And, that magic that happens when you trust that and you can go with that. Because a lot of time, I've done my little informal survey and I asked people, when you think of the most meaningful change that's happened in your life, did it go according to plan? Like, did you plan this out and map this out that you're going to do X, Y, Z? And every single person has said no. It's not how I envisioned it. It's not how I was thinking. This is not where I thought I would be. So there's a magic in kind of trusting the lack of things being spelled out or defined, and just seeing what appears and what pulls your attention and following that, trusting that.
Following your bliss. Like ultimately it's that definition of following your bliss. What is the next? All you need to know is the next step. Like, what is the next step that just feels brilliant and vibrant and juicy and good?
Yeah.
And I'm going to go there. And you're right. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Like I often talk about, and if I followed, even my own path, like I said, I quit my job as a psychologist. I actually started freelance writing for a while. And then I freelance wrote for this huge multi-million-dollar coach in LA. And then I got hired to run one of the biggest multi-million-dollar international coach training schools in the world from there. And then that was like, oh, I like what these people are doing. I'm going to be a coach. That's how I became a coach. It wasn't like me quitting psychology and becoming a coach. But if I hadn't followed the nudge to start writing, which seems like, what? Why are you going to freelance write when you have a PhD? Like, I never would have gotten there. And I often say to my clients, like, you don't know, buying that bum on the street a cup of coffee might be the way that you create a $1 billion investor in your company, because you don't know, that guy's brother could be a billionaire who is so touched by your kindness to his brother that he wants to figure out who you are.
Yeah, you just never know how things are going to turn out.
You don't know.
You have no
this
idea.
Is why intuition doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's not logical. You got to, sounds terrible, particularly for intellectual, bright, highly achieving women, but you got to unhinge your brain in a way and say, okay, my brain can't always figure out the answers.
Yeah.
These answers are here.
Right.
So I can allow them in.
Ashlee, this has been such an inspiring conversation and so vitalizing.
Yeah, I could talk to you all day.
So could I. So as we wrap up, what would your words of wisdom be for her?
The thing I want people to really know is that absolutely everything is possible, and that everything seems crazy until you do it. One of my favorite stories is of the Wright brothers. There were these two guys that were on a beach running around believing they could fly. Everybody around them, like their father was a pastor who thought they were crazy and didn't want to have anything to do with them. And they just persisted because they just had nudged that this was the thing that they could do. And we literally fly all around the world today because two guys believed I'm a human being who can fly when that was impossible. The impossible is only impossible until somebody does it. And that includes for you too.
Ashlee, what are some of the offerings or, things that, people can, I guess, if they wanted to work with you or learn more about you, what are some of the things that they can possibly, I guess, participate in with you? And also where can they learn more about your work?
Well, you can always check me out on my website. It's ashleegreer.com. And I have got a bevy of a whole bunch of programs, from working on your money mindset to learning about vibration and the law of attraction and manifesting and getting into alignment. Basically what we've been talking about today. I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding about a lot of that stuff, but I look at it actually from a scientific perspective of a lot of this stuff is actually backed by science and psychology, because it's about shifting your perspective, just exactly like we've been talking about today. I teach a lot of that. I also work one-on-one with clients in doing business development, helping them launch their business, getting their business up and running, but a lot of work on personal development, on really kind of owning their magic and their vibrancy and coming out and being fully self-expressed so that they can live this hell yes life that makes them feel like, oh, look what I did. Look at that life that I live, when they get to the end, so that they don't feel like they lived a life filled with regrets, and they can truly feel as though they lived a life full of passion and full of the success on their own measure, in their own metrics. And I also do some spiritual development work. I have a membership group where we, do monthly workshops on helping develop intuition and helping develop all of these spiritual gifts that I believe all of us have. And that as we develop more, we can really follow those nudges, with more and more ease. And so there's a lot of different ways to work with me.
And I'll just say this, I have been on your website a few times, and it's like being in a candy store. I'm serious. Like, oh, I want to try this and I want to read this. So I encourage our listeners to go check out, your website. And of course, we'll have the links to your site in the show notes so that listeners can also find you that way.
Awesome. I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Ashlee, again, for this magical conversation. And thank you for the work and light that you're bringing to the world.
Thank you so much. I think that this podcast is just amazing. And I think the work you're doing is truly outstanding. And I really appreciate what you bring to the world as well.
Thank you, Ashlee. Take care. Thanks so much for listening to the Women in Depth podcast. I hope it brings you a deeper understanding of yourself and others, and that you found some insights that illuminated and inspired. You can follow Women in Depth on Facebook and YouTube, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe on iTunes and leave a review. And finally, if you enjoy Women in Depth, please share with a friend. Again, thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.